I am Brittney, and I'm joined today by
Rachel, her partner
Hi,
in
Rachel.
crime.
Yes. So we got together to just do some chatting about art and being an artist and art making. So I think it would be worthwhile to give a little background of our own artistic background. So I am a classically trained vocalist. I've been to my both my bachelor's and my master's are in performance, particularly opera performance, but of course that there's a lot encompassed in that degree. We love our art song, our chamber music, sang some jazz, sang some musical theater, and I also am a writer. I have been from a very young age, and I've done a lot of fiction writing, poetry writing, nonfiction writing. I do painting. I've kind of dipped my toe into every pool that I could get it into. So that's a little start for me. How about you, Rachel?
So I am also an opera nerd.
Yes.
So I have been singing since I was, well, officially since I was like very young, but I didn't start taking lessons until I was like in middle school and stuff. But both my degrees are also in classical voice, opera performance. Um, Grad school is where we met. That was a whirlwind of a time. Um, but it was a lot of fun, very intensive. I've also been writing since I was very young, mainly fiction. I seem to only dip into poetry when I'm feeling particularly desperate emotionally. It's not so much of a way of life. I wish it were. But I do deeply love poetry, and I think that's one of the things that drew me to classical music is the weight that is given to poetry and how important that is for the music side of things. Um, but yeah, I've been writing since I was like in middle school too. I think it sort of started around the same time. So yeah, it's been a while. Mm.
Yeah, me too. I also started singing very young, like you said. So
Mm.
it's cool. It's cool that those things can go together, and I think that's a great jumping off point. Is how, especially for singers in the music world, how the text has so much to do with the music, and
Mm.
that being something that drew both of us in initially. That's something that when it comes to art making, I really love that, and always drew me particularly to art song for that reason because of the poems. I know for my graduate recital, I picked a chunk of my recital based on the poetry. Actually, I did searching of songs set to Mary Oliver's poetry, and then I did a whole Lily Boulanger set, and partly because I love the poetry in it, I love the music too, of course, but it definitely has to go together for me. I know that some people care more about one than the other, and there certainly is a mixture of both, but I am a fairly text focused artist.
I completely am the same way. I I forget who told me, who in my life told me, but first, because I feel like a lot of people have reiterated this, but it's text comes before music. The composer chooses the text and is inspired by the text to then write the the musical side of things. So they are. I think it's the thing that is the most important to me. Um, uh, I think it's the soul of of any given musical um, endeavor. I mean, like, think about it too in terms of like grand opera too. Like the libretto comes first. The person doesn't write. The composer doesn't write anything until they have a solid libretto. And how often a bad libretto can ruin a piece, and how um, a lot of pieces that have fallen by the wayside throughout history. Not all of them, because but there are quite a few that it's like the music is fantastic, but whoa, the libretto is like and it's like how heavily that influences an audience's perspective of the work, and but yeah, I don't know. It's like the bloom and the stem, right? Like the stem, the thing that holds up the bloom
Mm.
is the poetry for me.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great analogy for that, a great metaphor. You know, it's really funny you saying about grand opera and the libretto. I have some hot takes about opera that I'm not going to be sharing in this, but there's a lot that I've listened to and that I've sang that I've kind of been like, what's going on here? And you know, I can connect to the history of how opera is very old and was written at a time when that was the main form of entertainment gathering around, and a lot of things come into it. And I also understand that a lot of the themes are very universal, even if sometimes the plots are so convoluted and what's the word? Absurd. And
Yes.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes that absurdity is really funny, and sometimes that absurdity kind of takes it out for me, and I know it doesn't for a lot of other singers because, I don't know, I've talked to them about it, and it doesn't seem to bother them in the way that it bothers me, and that is part of why I have found myself stepping back from the opera world a little bit in recent years, because I'm very meaning driven. As we were talking about with text, I'm very meaning driven, and in the opera world, to get work in this, like you as the singer are not, unless you are also artistic directing and all of that, you're not setting the shows that are being put on. You're not choosing what role you get to do necessarily. Sometimes you can't at all. It's based on your voice and all of this stuff, and I really want to be engaged in art that I feel like is talking about something that matters, or at least that matters to me, or that I'm interested in, and I feel like the margin of those gets fewer and fewer at a certain point. So it's brought me back into my writing, and I had to step away from it, not entirely, but largely during grad school, just because, I mean, the time commitment that goes into singing and being in productions, you know, is quite much, and to be able to do both is very difficult at that level. But I have fallen more into my writing recently, and I'm working on writing some music things as well, which I'm quite excited about. And it kind of bringing that back to the table of saying, okay, I really want to be in this art form, but how can I be in this in a way that I want to be in this? And I'm curious what you think about this as well. When I was in opera, and I remember feeling this way in grad school, being in productions where everyone's going to have an opinion about what you're doing. The stage director, the stage manager, the orchestra director, and sometimes they want different things, sometimes they want the same thing. And regardless of what that is, sometimes I felt like my opinion was lower on the totem pole. And to be fair, I was in school and I was learning, and I certainly wanted all of that input. I never really pushed back on any of that because, you know, I trusted all of their opinions more than I trusted mine. But there does come a point in art making where you can say, I'm an artist. I've done the schooling, I've done this, so where's the line where you can make a decision? And within opera, particularly when you have so many directors directing you, like, when are you a puppet and when are you an artist, you know?
Have you ever watched Black Swan?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a theme in that movie, and I like to think about all the classical arts as sort of branches of the same tree.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a very similar culture between ballet and opera. And what I realized in watching that movie is that I think her name's Nina, Natalie Portman's character. So
Mm-hmm.
she's sort of an up and coming opera star, or I mean a ballet star, and when you see her life in her home with her mother, she's very much a child still. She's a grown woman, but psychologically and her lifestyle is that of a child. And like she's taken care of, she's sort of like managed and kind of, you know, and I definitely felt that way about I definitely feel that way about the opera world. There's a there's a level of like, and I don't know how much of this is because of our gender. Obviously, that story in Black Swan was also about a female dancer, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
wonder how much of this experience is tied to us being, um, she, her representing and personally identifying. But like, um, there's a level of like, do as you're told. There's a level of conformity, and not just in what we feel, but also how you are awarded or rewarded in this industry, to conform, to obey, to be a supplicant. And I don't think that's actually how this art form should be, or is meant to be. Because if you look at the origins of this art form, it is about collaboration. It is about like personal input, personal um, uh, expression. And I think what you're talking about and what I've observed as well is an aberration. I think it's a corruption of the art form. And not to bring too much class into this, but I remember having this conversation with my partner, who is who has a degree in political science, and we were very politically minded people and whatnot. And I was like, "Is this the bourgeois art form?" I'm like, "Did I just dedicate my life to a bourgeois art form?" And he was like, and like, let's discuss what it means to be bourgeois, right? It's not, it's actually not nobility. It is up jumped or hopped up working class people who have had capital, right? And with that social rung, that social class, comes the pressure to conform, to obey, to um, to to fit a certain ideal. And I think that class distinction has actually really has really kind of tainted this pure art form. And of course, I'm then reminded that without the bourgeois class, this art form probably wouldn't have existed, as it did in the sort of like late 18th and 19th century, which were so formative for opera and art song, right? Like, even art song, the idea of owning a piano in your home is a bourgeois ideal, right? Like, you had to be able to afford a piano to have a piano in your salon. Like, you had to have enough space in your home for a salon. You had to have a social um, circle that understood poetry and were literate in order to participate in a salon, to listen to your pianoforte. So there's a lot of things that we owe to the birth of sort of capitalism and away from feudalism. But not to get too much into that, but I don't know. I think there are certain pressures in this art form that are because of class. And when I was in grad school, I had this realization, and I remember thinking, I'm going to smile and nod and take everything into consideration. And then the day of the performance, I'm going to let it all just be what it is. And I'm going to just do what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And I think that good directors and good coaches understand that. And what I mean by good ones are the ones that understand the way artists are and our need to be a vessel, and to not to get too woo woo about this, but like to be a vessel, to kind of take in these things, and then what leaves us, whether no matter the medium, whether it's writing, painting, performance, it's to leave us in the way that we see things and that we've understood things. And I think good coaches and directors know how to let go. They know how to let go. Mm-hmm. Right? There is this like gathering and corralling that happens during the production process, but ultimately, opening night, it's your show. It's not them on stage. And to be frank, like, a lot of my directors have, like, I've been lucky. I've had a lot of lovely directors in my life, and they've never come up to me after a show and said, "You forgot what I told you on that one Thursday," and like, they've never been that way. And so, I don't know, I think there's a level of just sort of like pig-headedness that's needed as an artist. to say, that's great. I get that. I get where you're coming from, but I've got something to say now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard as a student to flex those muscles because there is a power dynamic there, you know. But I think in the real world, there's a level of that people want, whether or not they say they want that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they might say, I want you to do X, Y, Z, but really they want you to do your own thing. And they don't even know that they want that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm thinking about like the art that I consume and that I love to watch, and it's not like whether it's TV or opera or movies or any kind of performance, like it's not the perfect ones that get my interest, you know,
Oh, yeah.
and that hold my interest.
Mm-hmm.
The things that have me thinking about it afterwards, it's there's a truth in that. And I remember in grad school, our director would tell us, you know, if you're like sitting there rolling pills while you're singing, the audience is watching that because it's the truest thing that's happening on stage.
Yeah.
That and we are as audience members in any medium like so like honed in on the truth, and that's the thing that we like laser focus on. And if it is rolling pills, and then that's what you're looking at. But when someone's having a moment where it's just like, oh my God, they're having a fit on stage. This is amazing, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember someone telling me also, I wish I had a better memory, but someone said, you know, the how we judge art is by the intensity with which it is created. And and I find that to be true when you are intensely in the moment, when you're intensely telling a truth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you cannot take your eyes off that person.
Yeah.
And all that's to say, I think my journey in this art form is about, it used to be about something else. But as I've matured in this art form, it's become, I want to know your truth. And I want to know my truth as I perform. And I want to be able to just fly, you know? And
Yeah.
yeah. So that's how, I mean, it's that just, I'm just going to fight through all these opinions and say my truth. And
Yeah.
that's
That's really
hard.
beautiful. It's
In this
really
art
hard. It's
form,
really
it
beautiful.
is hard. It is
It
hard
is
because
really
people will
hard.
tell you they don't want it, but you
Mm-hmm.
have to believe as an artist that that's exactly what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything that you said, it sparked so many things in my mind. One of them that I'll just touch on briefly that we can always circle back to is the personalities that are often drawn into opera, into being an opera singer. It's like you said, and not just because you have to fight for your truth on stage, but also because of how few opportunities there are and all of that. You have to be strong-willed and you have to assert that at times, and that's really hard, and that does bring a lot of people with a lot of ego with them, which is very interesting because in a moment of truth I think there is a surrendering of ego that has to happen. It is
You
really
got to kill
beautiful
it.
and really challenging.
You got to kill it.
Yeah, and
And
I
it's not just ego in the sense of like having a big head. Tenors.
mm.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I love you guys. I love you guys.
Yes, we
No,
love our
but
tenors.
what I mean by ego is this like image of self that we portray
Yes.
into the world, and it is not. There's a distance between true self. I mean, I think the Japanese have this concept of like multiple faces, right? That
Mm.
there's your true face, the face that you share with your own self and those closest around you. Then there's the face you interface with the public with. But as an artist, you need to be able to access that face and that self at any given moment. And it's very much like that, like in the acting world, right? Being able to just surrender to the moment and listen. And that is such a important skill uh, for any acting endeavor, right? Just being able to shed it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I find the most interesting performers in the past and present have been people like, there's a lot to be said about Maria Callas and her voice and whether or not you think it's aesthetically pleasing. I mean, that's a personal taste thing. But I think
Mm-hmm.
as an artist, I respect her so much because she she doesn't care. She doesn't care what she looks like in the moment. She doesn't care about she just doesn't, and it's the letting go. I think I find that to be so like magnetic, you know? Just let
Yeah.
go. But there's a going back to the idea of like there being so few opportunities and like you have to be kind of really brave is I remember, and I tell my students that I also teach. I should have mentioned that in the beginning, but I've been teaching for
As do
about
I.
12 years now, and I tell my students what I read in Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. Have you ever read that book?
No, I've heard so
Oh,
many good things about it.
it's fantastic. It is really good.
Yeah.
And he said, in order to go into food, you have to be absolutely insane. Like you have to be insane
Yeah.
about it. Like it's not, it has to consume you. And I tell my students this, I was like, they're like, oh, I don't know. I get a lot of like, sort of like, middle schoolers and high schoolers thinking about what they want to do in college. And they're like, well, I've been doing music for so long. And I was like, don't do it unless, and I tell them this, I don't do it unless you can't be without it. Like it cannot just be a choice. It has to be this like spiritual calling, because
Mm-hmm.
it's long and it's hard and it's grueling, and unless you really believe, not even in yourself, but like just believe in this art form and the power it has, and like you wake up thinking about it, you go to sleep thinking about it, like unless you're that consumed by it, it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I've had a
yeah.
lot of thoughts about that recently too, and I have mixed thoughts about that. I do think there is so much validity to that for sure. Especially as I've gotten 2 degrees, I've put a lot of money into all of this,
Mm.
and you know, am I earning the money back through that? No. And that's a huge thing to consider. I also would love for there to be more ands and buts at the end of that statement, saying that you don't have to only follow this path. You don't have to only make your money from music. You don't have to follow the traditional opera, young artist, all of that. Like, there are ways that you can be involved in local theaters, and there are ways that you can put on recitals, and there's a lot of self and community value that can be added, and it doesn't have to be the traditional pipeline.
I completely
Yeah.
agree. And I think that all falls into this art form. Like you don't have to premiere at the Met for this to be worth it for you. You don't
Yeah,
have to,
and what's
yeah.
worth it can be different for everyone.
Yes, exactly. But to believe in something so wholeheartedly that you cannot imagine doing anything else, I think is a
Mm-hmm.
dedication to this art form that is beyond industry. And I think, I mean, maybe I'm just a romantic about it. I could be. I mean, like I'm pretty romantic about many things, but I think, you know, um, I think it was Robert Frost who said being a poet is a condition. It's
Yeah,
not a profession.
yeah.
Um, and I feel that way about being a performing artist. Being any artist is a condition, and if that condition is grave enough, like, if it's grave enough,
Mm.
you got to follow it. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
really up to you, I think is what Robert Frost was getting at, right? The idea that like it's not really up to you, man. It's a condition you were born with, and like you can't, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And that might come up in many ways, and I always tell my students, I'm like, express it in different ways. You might surprise yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Music is just one medium. It's like, would you paint with only red?
Yeah.
Would you only paint with red? I mean, you might. That could be a very cool exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But add blue, add yellow, like add metallics, like, I mean, just see what you can do. Like, how can you express yourself in that? And I remember when I was an undergrad, I picked up photography, and it was because, like, I realized, I'm in this very, like, oral medium, and I've not done anything to cultivate a visual aesthetic. And I felt kind of lopsided, and I picked that up, and I learned so much about music and composition and performance and movement through that medium. And you never know which waters are gonna bleed into. You know what I mean? Like, there's a
Certainly.
Seamus Heaney poem about the waters of the Atlantic and the Pacific merging. They stay separate, but they join together, and it's just like this perfect analogy for what the life of an artist is. It's not just, screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that also calls upon how artists need time and space to just do whatever it is that feeds their well. And I've had to be very intentional about this recently, especially with writing. A point where, sometimes I feel blocked and I need to just sit there and keep going, but sometimes I feel blocked and I need to go on a walk and not listen to a podcast and go on a walk and think about, like, go on a walk, that's all. Stare at the wall, just do that. Just let your mind wander, paint a little bit, dip into whatever it is, but artists kind of need that time.
I remember reading an essay about this, and it was like, capitalism devalues artists because our work cannot be commodified in the same way.
Yes.
Like, our final products can be commodified, but our process cannot be commodified. It's
Yeah.
like, the single other area in most people's lives, actually, even if you're not an artist, is sleep. You cannot commodify sleep. Capitalists are trying, I promise you. They're trying, They're like, well, if you don't sleep, you can, and it's like, no, I need my 8 hours. Leave me the fuck alone to just, like, unplug, right?
Yeah.
And that unplugging, or the seeming unplugging, you know, um, is really kind of like, look at these lazy artists. And it's like, you don't understand. I'm working right now.
Yeah.
This is work. And just because it doesn't look like labor doesn't mean that it's not. And there's this huge misunderstanding about artists being, like, lazy and sensuous, and I mean, maybe we are sensuous, but but just sort of indulgent, and and it's like, no, it's work. And I totally know what you mean. Like, there are times where, like, I'll have to go out to drive to another town very often these days, and it's about 30 miles, and oftentimes I'll do it in complete silence. My partner thinks I'm an absolute psycho. Because he's the kind of person that needs constant, like, lest his own mind present terrible things to. Yeah. Yep. But I'll do it in complete silence, and I'll be running dialogue in my brain, or imagining things, or wondering, what if I put my characters to this situation? Like, what would happen then? Just having this inner life. And I find the car to be a great place for it, because it's self-contained, and you're kind of on autopilot while you're driving. And yeah, to any outside observer, I look like I'm doing nothing. I'm doing nothing. But yeah, I mean, like, I think being an artist forces us to reevaluate work and labor, and it's a healthier way of being. Yeah, going for a walk, having a cup of tea, having a sweet treat,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like, and
Yeah.
and reading something that interests you, even if it doesn't have anything to do with what you're doing at the moment. You never know, like that Seamus Heaney poem, like you never know, you know, which
Yeah.
water is
What
going
will
to,
influence?
you know, influence
Mm-hmm.
another. And I have had inspiration from the wildest left left of the field stuff, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's just as important. And that's you know, it's so funny to me reading all these papers nowadays, like, what is creativity? And they're trying to quantify this mercurial thing, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you're never gonna get it. You're never gonna get it because you're trying to apply a grid to
Mm.
this amorphous thing that just happens to humans. And the only
Yeah.
thing that'll help you with that is time and doing nothing. Seemingly doing nothing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. Um, and when you were talking about commodification and all of
Mm.
that, and how in singing particularly the final product or the final performance being more commodifiable, it's interesting. I was thinking about how in art forms there are different ways of being finished with something. So in visual art, maybe it's your painting's done and it's in a gallery, or you've decided it's done, you're hanging on a wall. And with writing, if you are being published or something like that, like you have an end date that you can't touch your work anymore, and it's not yours anymore. Now it's the readers, and they're going to interpret it as they want. And I like the opinion of the writers that say what's in the book is truth and what's not is not for me to comment on anymore. That's yours now. And it's interesting with music because in a lot of ways the final performance is the final product. However, there are a lot of things that we as singers particularly, again, because I've talked about this with instrumentalists, we perform some of the same pieces over and over and over, and particularly arias, especially for auditions or something like that. And so you have one piece that's 5 minutes, and you maybe have like six of those that are, 5 minutes in length, give or take. And you're constantly improving upon them or seeing them in a different light or all this, but it's very interesting to have something that you've been sitting with for years, especially once you are settled vocally, whatever that means, or as long as you have a piece that you're working on. Like, I've been singing Caro Nome for a long time, and it's interesting, and I love it. It's my favorite thing to sing. But it's complicated in all of the ways that I've been working on it for so long. It's like, oh, I've got that bad habit there, and it's a physical habit, which just as, any person who's lived in a body for a while, which is anyone listening to this, if you've got a weird, like, kink in your knee, you gotta go to physical therapy for a long time to work that out. And it's like that with voice and your voice lessons and all of that, but it's really hard to work out something that is physically ingrained into your body. And a lot of ways, this is going back to something that our opera director talked about with both of us, also something that's mentally ingrained. And of course, you can think about this with people and relationships and their self-dialogue and other dialogue of how they've grown up and all of that. Similarly to how you are mentally working through a piece, emotionally expressing, mapping yourself into it, the first way that you learn something, our director loved to talk about the rats. And
The rats.
it's the rats, like, when they learn something, there's an incentive, and, even if they, you ring a bell, they get a treat. And even after you are, like, inflicting pain and all of that, and there's maybe an incentive to change the behavior, like, they go back to the original way that it was learned. And that's very interesting, especially when there's something that we have repeat performances of again and again. And it's interesting when you talk about ways that you are initially learning a new piece, how you approach something like that. And it's something that has been quite hard for me to break, because I did not, even as someone who's been writing and who has loved poetry and all of that for a very long time, I didn't initially approach any of my music learning from the text. I started, even if I didn't know the language, I started with notes and rhythms. And that, when you're in a performance and you're nervous and your mind blanks, if the last thing you learned was the translation, that's the first thing that's going to go from your mind. And you'll forget what you're even talking about. And then that robs your performance of emotional truth, which is what you were talking about initially, that nugget of truth that we kind of latch onto as storytellers, as audience members, and all of that. And there's something to be said about learning it from a text forward position in the first place, so that you can actually have a dialogue about something and not about, am I singing this note right? Am I doing that? Am I just moving my fingers? And yeah, I'd love for you to comment on that.
No, yeah, totally. I absolutely loved. I think that was one of the things that made. I was like, I'm paying a lot of money for grad school right now, and that
and I'm
moment
getting
with
my
the
money's
rats
worth right now.
is the money's worth.
Yeah,
It is
yeah.
is the cha-ching, And I was like, oh, this is why. And I feel like before that conversation that we had with our director, I it was kind of like lightning in a bottle for me. Like the things that I felt the most connected to, that I felt the most effective in. Not that the things that I feel are necessarily true, but the ones that I at least felt that I was most connected to. I didn't know why.
Me too.
Like why is it that, like, I'm a mezzo soprano, so all my stuff is mezzo. But like, why is it that Va laisser couler mes larmes and the suitcase aria? Why did those two things? Why is it that I feel the most free in singing those two arias? Why is that? And I didn't know until our director told us that. And I remember, like, sort of doing a forensic analysis of all the things that I've sung. And I was like, oh, the correlation was I started with the text. I started with the emotional truth of the text. Like, Charlotte in Va laisser couler mes larmes, what is she doing? She's trying to describe deep, deep, deep depression to a younger sister who cannot understand. And she's speaking in a bunch of metaphors and similes. And I remember reading that and thinking, as someone with a mood disorder, with depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how real that was for me to try and explain to someone who's never had this condition what it's like, and how you have to talk in similes and metaphors and stuff for them to even kind of like get that. And I was like, oh, this is so real. And with the suitcase aria, I have complicated feelings about motherhood and and childbearing, and how terrifying it must be to have those questions while pregnant. And I remember just like feeling that viscerally in my body, and then learning the notes. And I was like, ah, this is how you begin the process. And then going through, and I feel like those two arias, one of them came earlier in my training and the other came much later in my training. And it was like, I had bottled lightning with those two pieces, and then, oh, I need to do this with, like, I'm not a witch, but in Re de l'Abisso, she's having a spiritual moment. And like, how many times have I had a spiritual moment, whether it, not that it needs to be religious or spiritual in that sense, but like, how many times have I been moved by something so deeply that I have felt a physical effect from it. Everyone can, I think most artists anyway can really identify with that moment of being struck by something, and so like starting in that space of connection and empathy, I think is so important for any art. And it bleeds into my writing too, like any situation that my characters are in, like, what is the truth of their nature how would they react What is the truth of their nature
Mm-hmm.
that forces them to react in this situation? Um, and I think um, I've done so much character work in terms of my writing, and like um, it was one of those things that I had put up this like false firewall between, like writing, firewall, singing, and it's like, no, those two things are exactly the same. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes, speaking as them, reacting as this other psyche would, like those two things are exactly the same. And I feel like I became a better writer and I became a better singer or performer once I took that wall down between the two things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember a few things I'm thinking about now from that class that we shared with the director who's come up a few times. I had forgotten this until you told me in a conversation recently, actually, when we were reflecting at the end of class with the director about all of the things that we learned. I said, I forgot saying this until you reminded me, but I said, I have to forgive my past selves for not knowing what I know now, because it's so easy for me, and I'm sure many people, to look back on old work and things in life and be upset that I didn't know something, so I did something. I wasn't working with all of the information that there was because I didn't have it all, shocker. But I didn't used to approach learning in that way, learning music in that way, and being frustrated with myself of, oh, now I could sing that so much better. Now I could perform this role so much better than I did then because now I know about this, and it doesn't matter. Kind of let go of that, move forward.
No,
But
I
it's
totally
something,
agree.
yeah,
And for me, uh, part of the process of forgiving yourself, which I think is an
mm-hmm.
interesting concept of like, oh, imagine what I could have done
Yeah,
with this information 6 years
mm-hmm.
ago. If I had had this voice and that information and this soul, like, what could I have done? And I think that comes from a level of like scarcity, like a
Mm.
scarcity of opportunity, right? And trying to make every
Mm.
single one of them count. But I've learned that, for me anyway, a big part of like forgiving yourself is by teaching, by
Mm.
telling that information to someone else earlier on in their journey, and
Yeah.
having them think about it. And whether or not they take it seriously is beyond the point. The point is that you made an attempt to
Yeah.
communicate this thing, um, because you care about another person. And like I just think that like that's the cycle of things, you know
Yeah,
like
that's really
the
beautiful.
being a student and then being
Mm-hmm.
a teacher. I like, not to get all woo woo about that again, but like,
No.
but that journey, and
Mm-hmm.
that journey is so uh I think important for any artist.
Yeah, and it's
uh
also very individual in that, and
mm,
this is the same thing with being an artist. No person alive has had all of your experiences. No teacher had all of the teachers that you have. So you have all of this new pool of information in one spot that nobody else has. And same thing for being an artist. Your experiences are so individual, and that's what makes what you bring to the table so important and meaningful and individual.
yes. And I think it's one of those things that like I come from a culture that's incredibly sort of collectivist.
Mm-hmm.
I recently listened to a sort of like video essay about how like rice versus wheat like creates different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
How rice basically encourages collectivism, and how because you have to share land when you cultivate rice in a way that you wouldn't if you cultivate wheat. Um, and I think about art in that those two spectrums, like two ends of a spectrum, right? Like you have the individual subjective um, uh, unique side of being an artist. And then the other side is the collective, which is the shared experiences, your experiences with colleagues, the similarity of your experiences as a human, um, in this world, and how there's this like through line throughout all of humanity of things that we experience, right? And it's about, I think, the synthesis of those two things that I think, um, is so important to any given artist. I have a problem. I have a problem. I have a problem with a lot of like, uh, male writers of the
Mm-hmm.
20th century specifically,
Mm-hmm.
who love to just be like, the Marlboro Man, that's like
Yeah.
the lone man in the wilderness, and like
Mm-hmm.
living on the land and raising my cattle, and I'm just kind of like, no, you live in a society, like,
Mm-hmm.
and there are, in the human experience, of course there's that spectrum, right? There are people who live off the land and are very self-sufficient and
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but the majority of us live in a society, in a city, and we're all kind of interdependent on each
Mm-hmm.
other. And I think artistry in any medium is a balance and a testament to those two
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting mix of individualism and collaboration. And that is one of my favorite things about music is collaborating with people. Like it's never, if I'm learning a solo song, it's not solo. It's very rarely solo. There's often a collaborative pianist or an instrument or another singer or a whole thing going on stage, orchestra, all of that. And all of that stuff brings it to life in such a fun way. And when you were talking about how performers were once more perhaps able to put an individual statement on something within a collaboration, I think about early Baroque music when ornaments used to not be as practiced, and they were often in the moment. You would make up whatever the ornament is that you're doing,
And
and
your training was heavily focused on being able to pull anything out of the bag, right? Yeah.
yeah. And especially if it was like a one-on-one piece where maybe, like I've sang some pieces where the ornaments, we echo each other. And it was really fun. I was working with a trumpet player, and I remember our professor said, and my voice came first, and he said, Brittney, throw him some ornaments. I was like, what? Just make some stuff up on the spot and make him do it after you. I said, and I was scared, and he was scared, but we were like, we're all just playing here. It's okay. This is experimentation and all of that. And I just made up some ornaments on the spot, and then he followed after and followed my ornament or did it close and did a little new take that gave me an idea for the next, and that was so fun. That core of
It's
art being in play and creation
play.
in that moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the um there was a quote that I remember now, called "Artists were the ones that never grew up."
Mm.
Artists are the people in society that like never really grew up. Not really. Actually, I think it might have been Judi Dench who said that, who I admire so much. Uh, and Yeah, we've it's and I think people get burnt out when you lose the touch with play.
Yeah, and I think it's becoming easier and easier to lose touch with that for many reasons, for societal reasons and all that,
Well,
and
there's so many
particularly
pressures
thinking,
now. There's so many
yeah,
pressures now, like economic pressures and
yeah,
like political pressures now when it comes to
mm-hmm,
play. Like the idea of something like drag, which is
mm-hmm,
just so playful and like amazing,
yeah,
right? And just such a
yeah,
expression, this, explosion of color and textures and like personalities, and trying something on, and like there's it's such a joyous expression of play being politicized and
mm-hmm,
being demonized, right? And
yeah,
I feel like, not that opera is on the vanguard of that kind of
no,
political, scrutiny, But yeah, there's a lot of pressures in play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are all great points. And I was even thinking of the idea of pressure from the angle of in school, and partly with the scarcity mindset and all of that. There's a lot of pressure on, your technique being perfect and all of that. And perfect is another word that we're going to come back to. But and it's hard because there is a level where you do have to be really good before you can play. And I mean, you can play the whole time, but in order for you to get cast in a certain role, like, your technique does have to be at a certain level. But then your technique kind of has to be so good so that you can not think about your technique and be engaged in performance, which is also something we talked about a lot in grad school. It was like, if you're worried about the high note, it's going to show the whole time, and there's, your face, because what you were saying, that's the truest thing in the moment is, oh my gosh, can I do this? Rather than,
high notes
I'm
coming up,
sharing
brace
this.
yourself, yeah,
right.
Yeah, and then, I'm going to tell you right now, as someone who is an audience member as well as, a performer,
Mm-hmm.
I always know whether it's HD, Met broadcast, or whether it's from 25 rows back at the lyric, like I can tell when you're bracing for a high note.
We can see it.
Takes me right out of the moment, and it's like, oh God, but I mean, I feel like no one could be perfect, and everyone has their moments and stuff, and you just hope that those moments are few and far between.
Mm-hmm. I had an undergrad professor. I want to jump in with this quote. I think it will have to do with what you're saying too. I loved this. It was one of my favorite things that I got from all of my education, along with the rats. One of my other favorite things was, she said, practice makes excellence. She said, practice makes perfect, throw that away. Nobody wants to see perfect. Perfect isn't storytelling. That's not what will make it good. Practice makes excellence. And I loved that.
No, I totally agree. And, practice for me, I like to equate it to writing, right? And I think, like, it's so easy to kind of get stuck in the mindset of, like, technical perfection and, when it comes to singing. But it's like, you want to be good enough to where there's like, especially when you're writing, right? You want your grammar, your spelling, your paragraph structure to be good enough to where there's very little distance between you and the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not about hiding the process. It's making sure that the process is not intrusive.
Yes.
To what you're trying to get across to the audience.
Certainly.
Or your reader. Right? Like, you can write at any level, and I encourage that, right? But in order for you to be effective in your writing, you want there to be as little friction as possible. And I studied piano for a very long time. I was firstly a pianist, and then a vocalist. It's funny why I chose that path, and I think it's interesting to get back to when it comes to individualism and collectivism. But my teacher in college, she said, technique is a tool. It's not the end goal. It should never be the end goal. It is a tool for expression, because if you reduce that friction of mistakes or glaringly obvious moments, you're more effective in your ability to tell a story or to communicate an emotion. And I've lived by that rule. And I'm the kind of person that really enjoys the discipline that comes with trying to perfect something, or here's the word again, but trying to better something, right?
Yeah, me
this
too.
journey that, like, I kind of want to keep walking down this road of, like, how do I fix that? That's really interesting,
Yeah.
And
I've always been into singing as an Olympic sport.
Yes. As an athletic
yes
venture.
Yeah.
right? Yes, there is something about like being able to modify yourself physically to make something happen. And
Yeah.
I absolutely understand that. And like the idea of singing for 3 hours, like that's crazy. Over an
Mhm.
orchestra, unamplified, that
Mhm.
is Olympic. That is
It
Olympic.
is.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's been so many times where I've been caught up in the weeds of that. And like you said, that my goal, my end goal, my reason for being in it was that and not the communication. And it makes for different things, different products, different problems. You know, to be fair, I was probably more technically advanced than a lot of people
Mm.
who I was directly surrounded with for a really long time. But I was not as advanced at all with my storytelling, communication, being emotional on stage, and a lot of times I feel like it's the opposite with people. Like I've sort of felt on the outs with that, but I know it. I mean, it doesn't really matter. But I've seen different variants of that, and it's interesting now that I place those two on a much more even level. Now
You,
that I'm seeing it as a tool to yeah,
for expression, a tool for
exactly.
expression, for connection, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's not to say it's not important. It's just not
Yeah,
the thing, right? You know, there's
yeah.
a this is so silly, but I don't know about you, but I spend way too much time on Instagram. But there's a there's a there's a parody channel or a parody account
Hmm.
that's called American Schubert. Do you know about this?
I've heard of this. I've seen it. I don't remember.
Okay, so it's this like I'm pretty sure he's either high school or undergrad. He must be undergrad.
Hmm.
Like to have even heard of Erlkönig. Like
Right.
right. Um and he's singing it and it's just like uh not to add to the flame wars here, but like just like it's, not very proficient German.
Hmm.
The voice technique isn't there. He's kind of
Hmm.
screaming the whole thing. But what I really appreciate, and this is I think comes from a level of like from like personally, like it comes from a level of like having been challenged. My partner is a visual artist. I haven't mentioned that yet, but he's a visual artist, and
Hmm.
I came to art as like a contemporary art sucks,
Hmm.
kind of vibe. And he's like, and to his credit, he didn't just tell me I was an idiot. Like he was like, yeah, but why don't you challenge yourself to actually like really look at this thing? And I challenged myself when I look at these singers who have a long way to go, in terms of
Hmm.
technique and
Hmm.
stuff. I'm like, what are they doing right? What
Yeah.
are they doing right? And like a nuclear bomb could go off and this kid would be singing this song. You know what I mean? Like he is in it. Like he is
That's
in it,
great.
And I was like, I appreciate the suspension of disbelief, the ability to suspend disbelief
Hmm.
in this degree, to this intensity,
Yeah.
and to this, like it's his truth, and I'm just kind of like, wow, I could learn from that.
Yeah.
I'm not taking away the German or the vocal technique, but I'm taking
Hmm.
away the fact that World War III can start right out his door and he'd still be singing Erlkönig, and I was like, wow, that like he's got instincts there,
Hmm.
you know and
Yeah.
sometimes those instincts for communication can be harder to convey and to cultivate than the physical aspects of technique. And it took me so long to learn,
Hmm.
the communication and the vulnerability and that side of things, that I was like, good for you. You know what, keep on going, sir. And they'll be like day 279 of American Schubert, and I'm like, man,
Yeah.
cut him a break,
That's so funny. Yeah. Speaking of those learning moments, um, I I learned so much from you in that class,
Oh,
watching you sing. And you can be as humble as you want to right now, or you can be as grandiose if you want to. I would love to hear it, honestly. When you sang the suitcase aria, and I think you sang it maybe 3 times in class. I think we each had like 3 times. I cried every time.
Oh.
And nobody, like, I can't say that about a lot of things, a lot of people. And I'm an easy crier, but with opera I'm not, because I like with the performances that I've seen live I'm not, because you have to think you're in a classroom and or you're an audience, and so there's that level of things going on, and there's like we're watching our colleagues do their work and get critiqued and all of that, and so there are layers removed that maybe would make it so that an easy crier wouldn't just be crying. But there's also a level of you are so in it, and I've seen not that many performances, especially that was just voice and piano, and I really, really admired, respected all of that. I was like, that right there, that is an artist. Holy shit. And I would love to hear anything that you want to share about how you and you sort of did, but how you express emotion on stage, particularly. Like, is that easy for you? Is that hard for you? When did you feel comfortable with that, and what's your process in there?
First of all, thank you. It means a lot coming from a colleague that I love and respect. So I like I mentioned kind of earlier, like I always had a sort of emotional connection with that aria.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that aria had an arc that I didn't understand. I understood the peak of that arc. I understood the end of that arc, and but I didn't understand the beginning or the rise to the climax of that arc. And our director really helped with that, because you have to start that aria with a certain sense of like kind of not peace, but like a like a joy
Mm-hmm.
that you realize is very far away,
Mm.
um, and is actually not just far away, but is receding. Right? She's leaving a lifestyle behind and entering a journey that she doesn't even know she entirely wants.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And just in case people are unfamiliar with the suitcase aria, it starts with her describing the suitcase that she bought in New York, and she's going over all the things that used to fill it, right? Like things for herself, these fancy shoes and a Gucci dress and cashmere and like, these fancy things that she loved, she still loves. And then she in the opera flight, she's like 9 months pregnant. She's very heavily pregnant. She probably shouldn't even be traveling. But her husband's a diplomat, and he's on a plane, and he's left before her, and she's in this waiting area with a bunch of people having this like they all kind of weave in and out of their lives, right? And she's sitting there while everyone's asleep, and she's awake, and she's 9 months pregnant, and she's like, oh my god, my suitcase is full of different things now, and it's nothing, it's everything for this baby. And she's like, I'm never gonna be myself again. I'm never gonna. This is not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And she has this moment of just like identity crisis, right? She's like, whose bag is this? And she says that over and over and over again at the end of the aria. And I so identified with this. I've spent so long understanding myself, trying to understand this inner world that I have. And then just to think about it all in 9 months being completely changed, maybe not wiped
Mm-hmm.
out, but that's her fear, right? Like that's her fear of it. Whose bag is this? This is not who I recognize.
Mm-hmm.
And like I so deeply identified with that, and there's a level of like therapy when I perform.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
this is one of those pieces that just feels like therapy for me. And
Mm.
I I know when I'm effective on stage and I know when I'm being effective on stage because I stop wondering what people think of me.
Mm.
Um, and I think that kind of like letting go, I think is the not the trick, but is the effects of vulnerability, right? Like the idea that
Mm-hmm.
like the audience member, like whoever is watching this might not be pregnant, might not be stuck in an airport, might not be, freaking out about motherhood, but they understand these feelings, and trusting the audience to catch you
Mm-hmm.
is, I think, the core of vulnerability. Is it's not stripping yourself of the ego and of the faces and stuff just to do it, but is you're trusting the audience as a collective or as the individual to meet you where you're at and to catch you as you're free falling into their arms. And I think the better you are about your own inner dialogue, the more you believe that that can happen.
Mm.
I've noticed that about myself. Like I used to have a really, and I think this comes from like having started off music in a very difficult instrument. Like I find piano to be impossible, and part of that is why I quit. I was like, I got to like 13, and I was like, I'm not like this
Yeah,
kid.
same.
No way. I'm not. I'm never gonna make it. And there's a level of that, but like, um, but I was so self-critical.
Mm.
You
Me too.
know, I was so self-critical, and it's like, would you ever talk to another colleague that way? Would I
Mm-hmm.
ever look to you and be like, what the hell? I would never, ever, ever. I afford grace to my colleagues and to my fellow musicians. But why am I not affording grace to myself? And once I had that realization, the once I started to like speak to myself differently, the more kind I perceived other people of being. Like I perceived other people as being kinder than I had before. And then in that sense I could trust them to catch me when I
Mm.
decide to step off that precipice in any given performance. And it's really interesting as a teacher to see my students, like which ones fall into this trap and which ones don't. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, I see myself as a child in
Yeah.
these like 8-year olds who already have this propensity. And I'm like, don't, that's not what music's about. Like I had a
Mm-hmm.
student, we had a Christmas performance, like a holiday performance, right, last month. And to prepare for it, we did like a dress rehearsal run. And um, I had assigned the same song to two students. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
going on the same day. I knew that. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like the audience would have heard both at any point. But in the dress rehearsal, it was just my studio. So she got to hear, one of my students got to hear the other student sing her same song. And when I called that student to come and sing her version, she's on the spectrum, by the way. So I thought she was just kind of having an overstimulation moment. I was like, how are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
She's like, oh, I'm kind of scared. She's very truthful. I love that about her. She's very like upfront. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
why are you scared? Is it just like nerves? And she was like, no, I'm just scared that people will hate my version of the song. And I was like, Oh, no, no, no. She said, sorry, that's not what she said. She said, I'm wondering if I'm the best, is what she said to me. And I said, what if I told you that's not what music's about?
Yeah.
What if I told you that's not what music's about? She's like, what do you mean? Like, music's not about being the best. It's not. I mean, in this dog-eat-dog capitalist world, you gotta be the best to rise to the top and make money off it and whatever. I'm not interested in that side of music at all. I'm not. It's just not interesting to me. And I told her, music is about being yourself and sharing your work and your journey with other people. It's not about being the best. What does that even mean? She's like, oh. And she had this like moment of like, I'm free to do whatever I want now. You know what I mean? And that like moment of liberation is so like, I wish someone had said that to me. You know?
Yeah.
Just go out there and be yourself and say what you want to say. And it's not about being the best. And I think, you know, for me anyway, that like need to be the best was like this, like my parents are immigrants, right? And this like immigrant anxiety about making it in America, you know? And I think that kind of bled over into this art form, and it's like, that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
People are not looking, if people wanted perfection, they'd go to AI, you know? You know, have AI build some magical voice that can pop out of high C at 9 a.m. Like, sure, whatever. But if you're not, I mean, but that's the thing, people are not interested in AI. not really. Not when it comes to the arts, not really. There was a quote that said, like, AI cannot be horny, so it can't write poetry.
I saw that. That was good.
You know, yeah, there's you know, the pitfalls and the embarrassing things about human nature is what makes us interesting and interesting to watch. So
yeah, that's really interesting. I think I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying about that is having, and why I say, when I say about that, I mean about being comfortable, being vulnerable on stage and sharing on stage and all of that, is that there's a lot of being comfortable with yourself and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of breaking down of the idea and dichotomy of perfection and all of that, like not having that be a part of it. And I love what you said also about how you would talk to other people versus how you would talk to yourself. I think in the last 2 years, I was starting, a few years ago, I started this silly job that had nothing to do with music or anything like that, which was very good for my brain. And so everything I was doing, I was still placing this like insane amount of pressure on. I was like, oh, I don't know how to do this thing that really doesn't matter at all, which same with music. And instead of saying to myself what I would say, which was some version of why am I so dumb, or why aren't I, you know, some really rude way of saying why don't I already know how to do this. Now I literally told myself, okay, whenever I say that, I'm going to pause and say, I'm being a silly goose. And so I've been doing that for 2 years, and it changed my inner dialogue. And I am trying to approach music in that way as well. And I think that, like you said, trusting that your colleagues all support you, and our colleagues all supported us.
We kind of had a magical little group in grad school.
We did.
Like,
we did.
There was like not
lucky.
A lick of toxicity. I've never been in a healthier environment, girl. Like, I was like,
yeah, we did get very
feels
lucky.
Bizarre, but it was so enjoyable at the same time. I was like, wow, everyone cares and like is there for each other, and wow, okay.
Yeah. It was very special, and I know not everyone gets that environment, so we are very lucky. Yeah. And another piece that you were saying was about having music that you connect to, which does turn back around to what I was saying in the beginning about wanting to have a little more agency over what I perform. And so being able to choose repertoire that touches on something that you really care about, like you will do a better job expressing that than something that you really don't care about. Like, I'm going to be honest, I'm a coloratura, and everyone says sing glitter and be gay, and I'm like, I don't really give a shit about glitter and be gay. And I can sing it, I'll do it if you're going to pay me money, whatever. But, you know, for me to have like now I shouldn't say that, someone's not going to hire me if they listen to this.
You know, she
but,
said
you know,
one time on a very obscure podcast.
Oh man, that girl, I really did myself in. But you know, so having some agency over repertoire and choice, and you know, it's funny because I do think that certainly has an effect. And in the same vein, you know, give a girl a recital and she's still scared. You know, I got to choose all my recital repertoire, and there was nobody telling me what to do, and I almost was like, somebody tell me what to do.
Yes.
Like, I was scared of having that artistic freedom.
Yes.
And, you know, I am looking forward to the next time I do a recital to feel like, oh, I can do whatever I want. And I'm sure I'll still have fear, and there's always going to be some internal confrontation. I mean, maybe not always.
I don't think that's an aberration. I think that's comes with the territory.
Yeah.
I think you should be terrified. You know, I think, I mean, to a certain degree, I think you should be like, oh God, can I even pull this off? Like, I think there's a level of like tightroping when it comes to any artistic endeavor worth pursuing that is integral to how good it ends up being.
Yeah, certainly.
Do you know what I mean? Like, there's, and I think without the risk of it falling apart, you're not on the ball.
No.
And the audience is not excited. If they're like, if it's a sure thing that you're gonna hit every single bullseye, what's the point? You know, that's the whole thing about perfection, right? About AI. Like, AI is gonna get it every single time, right?
Yeah.
But me, I might flub a high note. I might flub a no note. My passaggio might be crap that day. You know? And you know what? Therein lies the excitement. And I think I think when it comes to performing, for most people anyway, I think there's a level of discomfort that is necessary.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even if, like, like what you're saying about picking things that connect with you, right? The more you connect with something, higher the bar.
Yeah, that's so true. I've been really nervous to perform the pieces that meant the most to me, and the most excited to perform them, because I wanted to do them justice. And, you know, the same thing in my writing. I'm working on a project right now that I really care about, and so I've spent a lot of time not writing it in fear of writing it poorly. And that's not the way to create anything.
And you know, and it's just like music, just like writing, you got to do it badly first.
Exactly.
You got to do it badly first. It's got to suck. It's got to be bad. But it's got to exist first, right?
Yes.
It's got to exist first. And I think that's also this ultimate exercise, this lifelong journey of learning to let go. And just learning to, I'm just going to allow myself for this to be crap for the moment. Right? I mean, that's what that's what it is, like singing an art song for the first time, or sight reading it for the first time. Ugh, terrible. I'm missing things. I'm flubbing notes. And it's like, okay, now I can go back and make things better because I know where the holes are now. You know, and that's the thing with writing too. Like, I mean, I have such a hard time with writing and editing while I write, and I'm like, stop it. Just write.
Yeah, let it exist first.
Yeah, let it exist first. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about that Lily Boulanger song cycle that I really love, and that's something that I felt a lot of connection to. Came from a text forward place. The journey of that meant so much to me, and I was the most excited to sing that on my graduate recital, and I had the most pressure on myself for that as well. And there was a lot of, you know, the line, great power comes with great responsibility. It kind of feels like that. And it also brings brings to mind the line that has something to do with nothing matters, so everything matters, and having that at the forefront when you are making most of the decisions for yourself as well.
Yeah.
Artistically.
Yeah. Can we talk about Lily Boulanger for a second?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's relevant to this. She died when she was 21, 22. She had tuberculosis.
Yeah, 23.
Was she 23? Something like that.
Something like that.
She's around your age.
Yeah.
Around your age. And to have packed so much into that short life.
Mm-hmm.
So much artistic integrity into that short life. You know, I remember someone said, dogs only live for like 10 years because they figured life out already. You know, that's kind of how I feel about her. I mean, not to be like, that was it for her. I mean, but like, you know, she was so, I think being ill for the majority of your life really put life into perspective for her. And, she must have felt that every day was so immediate. You know, just so like every day was so important. You know, when you're sick and you never know when you're going to feel better. And I know she had better days and she had worse days when she wasn't feeling well, but like to feel that immediate about what you need to say as an artist, like I dream of that kind of clarity. You know? Not to say I want to be sick with like tuberculosis. No thanks.
Right.
You know,
right.
But just to say that kind of immediacy. I feel like if we all felt that, we'd be creating things that mean a lot to us and to the people around us.
Yeah, having a really central core. You know, I think she was 23. Not that matters too much.
Yeah,
but I remember writing in my program notes that for when I was performing it, I remember writing like, as old as I am now is when she died. Like, I'm singing to you, and this was the end of her life. And I remember really connecting that too. I was like, oh my God. Yeah. And because at the end of the song cycle, the person is contemplating death, and I was like, oh my gosh. And slightly going away from Lily Boulanger, I remember also really enjoying being able to bring myself into my program notes too, because for a while writing about music, I felt like I was just like doing like a research paper that felt kind of devoid of what did I have to bring to the table aside from picking the subject matter. And I really enjoyed finding this freedom. I remember saying to my voice teacher, like, can I make some revisions to my notes? What do you think if I did this? And I like had all of these extra little paragraphs here and there, but they were about me feeling connected to the music. It's saying something like, I am the age that she was when she died, and that brings a different level of this. And I would like to share with the audience something that feels really meaningful to me about this and my experience interacting with this piece.
You know, I feel like that brought something else up for me, which is that, like, I feel like we have such a different, in the modern era, in the contemporary era here, we have such a different relationship to death. You know?
How so?
Like, we don't expect death until you're in your 70s or 80s.
Yeah. You know? We assume more longevity.
Yeah, and that's happened in the last 100, 150 years. But before that, people just, like, get a cut on their finger and they get infected and they die. And then that's it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Kids just get ill with smallpox and drop dead. Like death was so much more present and immediate in history. And, like, that's why that's one of the reasons why I love Lily, is because, like, she does deal with death. There's a choral piece that our a mutual colleague and I did a project on, like a discovery project on le fond de l'abîme, at the looking into the abyss or whatever, and that whole thing is a biblical poem about death, you know, and I feel like it's one of those things that like art can help us face, which is these, especially the classical arts, right, that deal with these themes of humanity, which, I mean, it's a condition of humanity that we'll all die. And like, how did Lily process this? How did Ms. Boulanger process this? And we can learn so much from people who have gone ahead of us. And like, yeah, like just saying like, I'm singing to you now at the age when she stopped breathing. And that's so powerful. And I love that you added that, because not only does it personalize it to you, it personalizes to the people who are listening to you. Like,
yeah,
oh, this outlived her, and that is so powerful, I think.
Yeah, and that's something that I really value and want to see more of in the classical music world, is finding a way to really make the stuff that can seem old and intangible tangible and present and in the room with everyone. And I think that especially people who are not in the classical world, so much of classical music feels very unapproachable for so many reasons. For performance practice reasons, not knowing when they're supposed to clap makes them feel weird, and then they're like, I don't have a dress to wear to the performance, or the fact that we're singing in other languages, and there's all of these levels of removal that I really look forward to seeing. I think our generation hopefully will play some part in this. I know that I want to, of making it more accessible and more, and I feel like accessible is like a buzzword today, but I mean like finding a way to bring in audiences and to show them that humanity is all connected, and music is connected in all of this, and writing and all of that.
You know, I think so much of that conversation about accessibility gets turned on us performers and the people who are programming and the people in the arts. But and I agree with all that. I think that is our responsibility to reach out to an audience, you know, and do our best to not be aloof and distant and say, well, this is art, and if you can't understand it, then that's your fault. You know, like, there's a level of, like, white glove, like, white tableclothness to that I really reject. You know, but I also want to say, like, in the last 50 years, there is indeed, I think, room for criticism for anti-intellectualism. And there is a level of like, oh, that's French, I don't understand it, and then the shutters come down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or, oh, that's really old and it's in German, and I'm like, ugh. You know, and there's just like this like disconnection, like just pulling the plug on something because it doesn't immediately,
because it's challenging.
Because it's challenging in its own way, right? Like,
yes.
Yeah, it's in a different language, but have you read the translation? Because it's so amazing, you know? Have you tried just plugging it into Google Translate and just seeing what comes out?
Yeah.
You know? And there's a level of, like, I mean, I think also, like, no one has the time anymore to engage with art in a long-form way.
Yeah. There is some value that feels lost in that culturally.
Yes.
And in some ways, I think there can be more brevity in the art form. And in a lot of ways, I think that people's attention spans have really shifted. And I would love to see a shift back towards attention, putting our attention into something, engaging with something that is challenging or perhaps uncomfortable.
Yes. And I remember having this conversation with a previous director, not our grad school director, but my undergrad director, who is a classically trained actor. So he grew up on, he cut his teeth on Shakespeare, which is a shame no one has time for anymore, because I love that stuff so much. You know, like, try to memorize sonnets and monologues and soliloquies, because I find there's something so deeply musical about Shakespeare that I find very, and the classical approach to something that I'm like, oh, I recognize this, you know, it's very close to singing. And he said, like, I was singing Voi che sapete, which is Cherubina's aria from The Marriage of Figaro.
Mm-hmm.
And after my performance, he was like, you need to remember that this was written at a time when people just, like, sat and did nothing. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're singing it like, Voi che sapete che cosa è amor. Done. Start something else. Done. And then start something else. He's like, that's not what this aria is about. This aria is, Voi che sapete che cosa è amor. He's like, the one idea spans multiple phrases.
Yeah.
He said, you're chopping things up like you're pacing this aria like it's a commercial every 30 seconds, right? And then he said, but this isn't a commercial. This is a novel. Stretched out. It's much longer arc. And I was like, oh my God. It's what my dad talked about when I was younger. He's like, I'm the oven generation. You're the microwave generation. You know, and I was like, I'm pulling a microwave generation. Oh my God. But Mozart wrote in the oven generation, right? Yeah, so it's one of those things where I'm like, you know, it reminds us to slow down. To think for more than 30 seconds at a time. You know? And I find that that is so valuable in today's world, when everything is a snippet, when everything is a TikTok. Not to say there's anything wrong with TikTok. I love TikTok too, you know. It's fun. It's like, someone said Instagram and TikTok is like cigarettes for your eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like dopamine hit, you know, which I'm guilty of, don't get me wrong. I love that stuff too. Sure. But, you know, there is value to sitting down and, like, analyzing a poem. You know, just saying, what does this person mean? And trying to wade through something in order to get to something. I think that effort is lacking in today's world, that makes classical art forms even harder to engage with. Yeah. But I reject the notion that because something is difficult to engage with, it lacks value.
Certainly.
You know?
Yeah. Well, as we're on the note of brevity and length, we have been here for an hour and a half now. So.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Same, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to say before we sign off? That's a lot of pressure.
Good question. Pressure.
Pressure.
No, I would say, I would like to just make a general statement about, if you're an artist, I want to broaden that, actually, which is to say, I think everyone should engage with creation in any capacity. And, you know, there's this, like, dialogue with, or this not dialogue, but this, like, notion that's been going around, like, AI has democratized art. And it's like, no, it hasn't. It has. That's not democratization of arts, right? Yeah. Even if it's painting a house with a little sun on the corner, like, engage with art somehow. And it can be interpreting and viewing and consuming, but let the consumption affect you so that you want to make something of your own. And it never has to make money. It never has to see the light of day, if you don't want it to. Or you find a small group, like we've made a little writers collective in the last week or so, just for us in a safe space to share what we've written, or sung or danced or drawn or painted, whatever it is, because I remember unplugging from that world and it making my life so much heavier, and how much lighter I feel now that I have something to say and somewhere to say it. And yeah, it's slow. Getting good at something is slow. As a teacher, I understand that. But not everything fast has value. Very few things that are immediately available has value, and there's so much discovery to be had about yourself, about humanity, about other people. And do it with people you like. Do that discovery in people you like, and create community, and foster community and cultivate community. I think my parting words.
Yeah, that was all really beautifully said. So yeah, echoing that. A very brief anecdote that is related. I had stepped away from music for a little while, and I remember coming back to it looking at something different than what I had studied, and I was just trying to learn a little pop song, like playing on the piano and singing at the same time, and I was trying to figure out what are the chords, how can I play this in a way that makes it more smooth, and just like trying to learn a song. And it felt like it had been a little while since I had tried to learn something in that way, and there were moments of frustration and moments of joy and all of that, and when I finished, there were times in the process where I was like, oh, I'm not getting it, I want to stop. But I made myself work through it, and it felt really valuable to work through something hard, work through something uncomfortable. And sometimes art, even if you're, like you said, making a little house, a little sun in the quarter, maybe you're mad that your roof isn't straight, and it's like, it's not the roof that's keeping you dry from water. It's fine. Be uncomfortable. Know that you can work through something that isn't easy, and there's a lot to learn within that about yourself, about the world. And it's really beautiful. I feel like every time I make something, I come away with something new.
Yes.
Yeah, creation begets creation. Creativity begets creativity. There's more.
There is more.
And it's a lifelong
And what I was
discovery.
saying about community, right? Like, I learned so much from you. I learned so much from trying to understand your process. And where this is coming from. Like, I find the deeper I dig, the more I learn. And I wish, and I feel like that's just people in general, right? Like, the closer you get to the core, the more you understand about who they are as a person. But same thing with art, like it just mirrors that. And I just want to say I really appreciate you, and and the value you add to my life. And yeah, I hold that very near and dear to me. So.
I do too. Yeah, really grateful for you.
Same.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks everyone who's joined us.
Sure.
It's been really lovely to share these thoughts with each other and with anyone who stumbles across them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's do it again. All. This was amazing. I had a blast.
Love to. Me too.
Okay, same here.